Welcome, everyone, to Rutgers at the Voice of College Football. And today is a great day as Rutgers defeats Minnesota 26-19. If you like this show, please hit that like and subscribe button. Also, the StreamYard link is in the chat if you'd like to call in. Now, this is a particularly happy day for me, and I'll tell you why. Because when I started this channel, Rutgers was 4-0. But ever since I started this channel, Rutgers has lost 4 straight games, making me the proverbial jinx and the Rutgers downfall imminent. However, Rutgers got back on track today with a victory over PJ Fleck and the University of Minnesota Golden Gophers. We're going to talk about the team statistics, go over highlights from the game, and talk about some other great games that are going to be happening tonight and a few upsets. So let's look at the team stats in this 26-19 victory for Rutgers. Total yards, Rutgers 349, Minnesota 297. Passing yards, Rutgers 240, Minnesota 262. Rushing yards, Rutgers 109, Minnesota an alarming 35. Yards per play, 4.9 for Rutgers, 4.6 for Minnesota. First downs, they're even, 18 and 18 for Rutgers and Minnesota. Third down efficiency, 4-14 for Rutgers, 7 of 16 for Minnesota. Fourth downs, Minnesota didn't attempt any. 1 of 2 for Rutgers. Total plays, 71 for Rutgers, 64 for Minnesota. 1 turnover each, but as we'll talk about later, the 1 turnover for Minnesota was critical. Time of possession, Rutgers, 32 minutes, 1 second, and Minnesota, 27 minutes, 59 seconds. Let's talk about the player stats, beginning with Minnesota. Max Brosmer, very good quarterback. Didn't have his best day, 27 of 45 for 262 yards and 1 touchdown. Running back Darius Taylor, 10 carries, 28 yards and a touchdown. Marcus Major, 2 carries for only 9 yards. Receiving for Minnesota, Jamison Gears, 8 receptions, 73 yards. Daniel Jackson, 7 receptions for 70 yards. And Elijah Spencer, 5 receptions for 61 yards. Now, for Rutgers, Ethan Kaliakmanis, 17 of 33, 240 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. And Ethan, of course, is a transfer from where? Minnesota. Rushing, Antoine Raymond, 22 carries for 73 yards. Kyle Monangai not playing today. Antoine Raymond did a serviceable job replacing Monangai. Jashawn Benjamin, 11 carries, 66 yards for a 6-yard per carry average. So, what happened on the receiving end? Ian Strong, 4 receptions for 89 yards and a touchdown. KJ Duff, 3 receptions for 65 yards. Demir Miller, 5 receptions, 58 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, those are the statistics. But what really happened in Piscataway, New Jersey today? Well, Minnesota comes in on a winning streak and a plus 44 scoring margin over its last few games. Rutgers comes in, 4-game losing streak and a minus 67 point average. Minnesota favored by 6.5. So what happened in this game whereby Rutgers was able to pull out the victory? Well, Rutgers came in 4-4 and 1-4 in the Big Ten Conference. Minnesota came in 6-3 and 4-2 in the conference with a victory over the University of Southern California, who actually beat Rutgers 42-20 in Los Angeles 2 weeks ago. So before the game, I said that there were going to be several keys to the game that would determine the outcome. Number 1, Ethan Kaliakmanis had to have a good game against his former team, the Golden Gophers. Kyle Monangai, his status was uncertain. Didn't know what was going to happen. Didn't know what was going to happen with Kyle Monangai. Turns out he was out and did not play today. Time of possession. Turnovers. And we'll get to that later. Turnovers were a huge factor in this game. Third down stops, explosive plays, fourth down conversions, penalties, and controlling the line of scrimmage. Rob33, I see in the comment section. Thanks so much. I did not look at the Michigan-Indiana game yet, but from what you're saying, it doesn't look like it's going well. Nor has it gone well, as we will talk about, for Cam Ward in Miami. So, what happened in this game? Okay, what happened to P.J. Fleck and the Golden Gophers that they lost in Piscataway by 7? Well, let's start out with the first drive. The first drive, okay, Rutgers is driving the ball, a balanced drive, but then comes that critical 4th down. One of the keys I said that was going to be critical for Rutgers. 4th and 2, Rutgers does not convert. So we're starting to get that feeling already that it's going to be the same old story yet again. And then Minnesota gets the ball, and with Max Brosmer at quarterback, a quarterback with a 70.6 completion rate. First play hits a wide open receiver. 3rd and 6, he is nearly sacked, but manages to escape and go for a 28-yard run into Rutgers territory. And then on 3rd and 8, what happens? Darius Taylor gets the ball on a screen pass and runs 18 yards for a score, 7-0 Minnesota Golden Gophers. So when we talk about those keys that I had mentioned, 3rd down stops, it didn't start out well for Rutgers. They couldn't convert on 4th down, and they couldn't get the stop twice on 3rd down, leading to a 7-0 Minnesota lead. P.J. Fleck with his tie on the sidelines, nice sunglasses, must have been happy at that point, but unfortunately that would not portend well for the Golden Gophers. Rutgers' second drive was a critical drive. Okay, on 3rd and 5, okay, we go back to those 3rd down conversions. Ethan Kaliakmanis completes a 40-yard pass to KJ Duff. Now, let's be clear about what Kaliakmanis and the offense was doing today. They were throwing a lot of 50-50 balls and hoping for one of two things. Either the receiver catches it or they get a pass interference call. And they got enough of both such that that strategy paid off. Well, after the 40-yard pass to KJ Duff, Kaliakmanis follows up with a 20-yard pass to KJ Miller, and ultimately it comes down to something that reminds us of Lincoln, Nebraska. 4th and goal at the 2. P.J. Fleck is sitting there adjusting his tie with those shades, looking very businesslike, expecting the Gophers to stop Rutgers. But what happens? Rutgers not only converts 4th and 2 once, but twice. The first 4th and goal, Rutgers scores, but P.J. Fleck, in true P.J. Fleck fashion, called a timeout just before Rutgers got the playoff. So the score was nullified, and Rutgers had to go for it yet again on 4th and goal. Well, it didn't work out for P.J. Fleck. Whatever adjustments he made were bad adjustments because Rutgers this time hits Demir Miller on a slant for the touchdown. So we've got a 7-6 game at this point. I'm sorry, 7. We're tied up at this point. And then Minnesota goes on its second drive and continues the momentum that it had on the first drive with Brosmer, 16-yard pass for a first down, 10-yard pass to Daniel Jackson. And then Rutgers, remember we talked about those keys, one of them being penalties. Rutgers commits an inexplicable personal foul, giving another 15 yards to Minnesota. Now, personal foul penalties, I got to tell you, they're the worst. There's no excuse for them. Typically, they happen when the players lose their temper, can't control their emotions. Now, listen to me. Here's what I'll say to the Rutgers players. If you're angry, if you're upset, I don't know, hit a punching bag. All right? Go to therapy. Go see a psychiatrist. Don't commit a personal foul penalty in a critical game against a team that's going to capitalize on it and is already moving the ball. Absolutely inexcusable. However, they did redeem themselves when they stopped Minnesota deep in Rutgers territory. Well, not too deep in Rutgers territory, but on approximately the 35-yard line. They stop them on 3rd down. Minnesota hits a 51-yard field goal. It's 9-7 Minnesota. You might be asking yourself why it's not 10-7 Minnesota. That's because they missed the PAT after their first touchdown. Another inexcusable act, given that the PAT is probably something I could hit 99 times out of 100 in my sleep, and these kids getting a full scholarship missed the point after try, so it's 9-7. Rutgers gets the ball back. What'd they do here? They started off well. Another third down conversion on a pass to Demir Miller and a second third down conversion on a pass to KJ Duff. So what is Rutgers doing? They're hitting those keys on third down conversions. They're having success. And then Ethan Kaliakamanis, we talked about how he needed to have a really good performance today. Well, 18-yard pass to Demir Miller. Kaliakamanis to Miller makes it 14-9 Rutgers. Minnesota's next drive, 3rd and 1. Minnesota converts. But Rutgers stops Minnesota on a 3rd and 6. Once again, those keys. And what you saw at this point in the game was Rutgers beginning to control the line of scrimmage, which they did particularly in the fourth quarter and on the last 3 drives. So after the Minnesota punt, what happens? We talked about that one key called explosive plays. We talked about how Rutgers was throwing those 50-50 balls. Well, on a 3rd down, Kaliakamanis hits a 70-yard pass to KJ Duff. And then on a 3rd and 9, deep in Minnesota territory, Minnesota stops them. But pass interference turns into a 1st down for Rutgers. So now this is what is so infuriating. Rutgers has 3rd down from the 8-yard line. Okay? You're up 14-9. So if you're the coach at Rutgers, Coach Giano, and Coach, we're looking forward to having you on the show in December. Can't wait to talk to you and hear about your thoughts regarding the state of Rutgers football, which after today's game looks pretty bright. You're up 14-9. It's 3rd down from the 8-yard line. You know you're going to be able to get 3 points. The last thing you want to do is turn the ball over. So, what happens on 3rd and goal? Ethan Kaliakamanis turns the ball over. Turns it over. Intercepted in the end zone, and the game remains 14-9. Cannot make those mistakes. Now, Minnesota is not a great team, but they're a good enough team. You make those mistakes, you give away points like that, there's just simply no excuse for it, just like there's no excuse for the pass, the personal foul calls. I mean, unbelievable. Keeps Minnesota in the game. Now, Minnesota, next drive. Only 3 minutes left in the half. Max Brosman sacked for a huge, huge loss. And that would be the beginning of several sacks because Rutgers' defensive line found life and started dominating the trenches, particularly in the fourth quarter. And at this point, I have to tell you, you could see a change in the mindset of Rutgers. They were starting to believe. They were starting to believe that they could win this game, and they were starting to get a bit of that swagger back, a bit of that confidence back. And I give credit to the defensive scheme that Rutgers had, and also, the heart of the players, because once they started to believe, they started to dominate. So there are certainly areas for improvement, though, because on that drive before the half, 3rd and 14, Minnesota converts. 1st down, and then a 19-yard pass to midfield. On 3rd and 4, though, Max Brosmer overthrows a receiver. So a little advice for Minnesota. When it's 3rd and 4, all right, Golden Gophers, Minneapolis, real nice city, Minnesota, great school. 3rd and 4, get the 1st down, okay? Throw a relatively safe and reliable pass to get 4 yards. Instead, Brosmer went way downfield with a low percentage throw, okay, overthrows the receiver, and then they have to punt. A mistake. So we go into the half with the score 14-9 because Rutgers on their next drive went nowhere. Now, Rutgers gets the ball, okay? Minnesota gets the ball to start the second half. The first rule is do not give your opponent momentum. Keep the momentum. Win in the trenches. Keep the pressure on Brosmer. Shut down the run. And what does Rutgers do? The exact opposite. On 3rd and 3 on their first drive in the second half, Minnesota converts. And guess what happens after that? A second personal foul on Rutgers, bringing it to 2 personal fouls, an extra 15 yards, and a total of 30 yards literally given away to Minnesota. Now, I understand players are emotional and passionate, but like I said previously, if you're angry, I don't know, go hit a punching bag, go see a doctor, go to an anger management class, listen to some music, I don't know, Bon Jovi for all I care. But for God's sake, don't commit a penalty like that, especially for the second time, which gives Minnesota great field position, after which they convert on a 3rd and 4 on a pass to Elijah Spencer. They drive down to the Rutgers 17, of course, assisted by 15 yards from an angry Rutgers defender. Brosmer, TD pass to Marcus Major, bringing it to 16-14 Minnesota. Rutgers does the opposite of what any good team should do. They give Minnesota the momentum back. PJ Fleck is adjusting his shades and his tie, looks happy, looks confident. Rutgers looks deflated. But that would not be the end of the story. On Rutgers' first drive in the second half, Antoine Raymond replacing Kyle Monongai, another Don Bosco High School product from northern New Jersey. Antoine Raymond, 15-yard run. But then Rutgers started to show the signs of the old Rutgers. 3rd and 6, a pass to Demir Miller in the flat. Wide open, he drops it. Can't do that. You're down 16-14, and you're wide open in the flat, and you drop it. Because what happens is you give Minnesota the ball back, and you're giving them a chance, okay, to not only score again, but to make it a 2-score game. Well, Minnesota, fortunately, was not up to the task, because on the next drive, 3rd and 12, Max Brosner again throws a fade to a wide receiver who simply misses it. So between Rutgers and Minnesota, the receivers didn't seem to want to catch the ball. Minnesota has to punt, and then Rutgers gets it on the next drive where Callie Kamankis on a great pass to Ian Strong takes the ball past midfield, then almost throws another interception, then is sacked, and then on 3rd and 3 throws an incomplete pass on what may have been the absolute worst drive of the day. So at this point, you're starting to get that feeling that Rutgers is simply not going to win. That Rutgers is reverting to form, and that we're headed for 4 and 5, and a lot of questions in Piscataway that Shiano's going to have a difficult time answering. But Minnesota, now on its second drive to push this to a 2-score game, Max Brosman completes a 21-yard pass to midfield. But on 3rd and 5 from midfield, they do not convert, and Rutgers holds them. So Minnesota has 2 drives to increase the lead to a 2-possession game, and they fail both times. Anybody who's ever played sports before knows that you do not let an inferior opponent stay close. If you do, they get confidence, and it could come back to bite you. I'm not saying Rutgers was substantially inferior, but Minnesota was probably the better team, but they let Rutgers stay close. So Rutgers' next drive, they start at their own 5-yard line. Antoine Raymond, again, another good run for a first down, but on 3rd and 5, Callie Kamanis throws an incomplete pass, and they punt. So now Rutgers is giving Minnesota a 3rd opportunity to push this to a 2-score game and essentially take control of the game. Max Brosmer takes it over, takes the first snap, and what does he do? He takes a 12-yard sack. Now, I don't understand how that's possible. You either check down or you throw it out of bounds after you're outside the pocket. Takes a 12-yard sack, which immediately puts Minnesota at, of course, a disadvantage. And then on 3rd and 22, sure, he completed a 17-yard pass to the 40-yard line, but it was short by 5 yards, and they had to punt yet again. And just like you don't want to keep an inferior opponent too close, you don't want to fail to dominate and fail to get ahead when you have an opportunity. That was 3 opportunities Minnesota had, and they blew it. So now PJ Fleck started to readjust his tie again and starting to see a bit of fog through his glasses. So what happens on Rutgers' next drive? Well, apparently Ethan Kaliakmanis liked what he saw from Max Brosner and decided that he'd get sacked on first down too. So the ball's now at the 5-yard line. And then on 3rd and 16, Minnesota holds. But Minnesota, apparently enjoying the way Rutgers is playing, decides to commit a personal foul penalty, allowing the drive to continue. Absolutely inexcusable. PJ Fleck at this time was gripping his tie and wondering what is happening, why it's happening, and why he's there probably. So what happens? Rutgers keeps driving the ball, but yet again on 3rd down and 7 in Minnesota territory, throws a pass to Demir Miller, who misses it. Why are you missing the ball? All right? Why? The ball is right in your hands, and you're missing it. You've got to want to win. You have to focus. You have to have discipline. You got to make those plays because against good teams, just a handful of plays are going to decide it. And you are giving Minnesota chance after chance after chance to make this a 2-score game. You're committing 2 personal fouls, allowing them to sustain drives. And when you are driving the ball, you are making mistakes by dropping the ball twice and when you could have been deep into Minnesota territory. So now Minnesota's got, a 4th shot to make this a 2-score game. Starts at the 12-yard line. I don't know what to say. Max gets the ball and he throws it to the tight end. The tight end runs with the ball. The tight end gets hit. Mind you, we are near about the 10-yard line. He fumbles. He fumbles the ball. Minnesota in control of the game with its 4th chance to go ahead by 2 scores. Fumbles the ball near the 10-yard line. Rutgers recovers and is in business because at this point it's 16-14. We know Rutgers is going to take the lead with a field goal and possibly with a touchdown, an even bigger lead. So what happens on first down? Kaliakmanis throws to the end zone, pass interference on Minnesota. Once again, penalties, lack of discipline. And a poor PJ Fleck, he must have taken off his glasses to see if he could see better as Minnesota imploded with a turnover, a PI call, and then the 3rd strike. Kaliakmanis, touchdown to Ian Strong on a slant into the end zone to give Rutgers the lead, 21-16. Now, at this point, Minnesota's got to be thinking, all right, we cannot have played worse. You got the quarterback taking sacks. You have a personal foul penalty when you stop them on 3rd and 14, allowing them to sustain the drive. You're fumbling deep in your own territory, essentially handing Rutgers a touchdown. On 1st and goal, you're committing pass interference, putting the ball on the 2-yard line. So I don't know. Maybe they went to New Jersey and thought maybe we should lose, or maybe we just are going to focus on going to New York City, going to Times Square, going on Broadway and not playing disciplined football. The football that for the last 4 games had Minnesota at a plus 44 score margin with minimal turnovers. So now Minnesota's got to regroup. PJ Fleck puts the glasses back on, adjusts that beautiful red tie, and on the first play of Minnesota's next drive, what does Max Brosmer do? He decides to emulate the tight end, fumbles the ball as he is sacked on first down. Luckily, Minnesota recovers. But they've lost about 8 yards, and then after an incomplete pass on second down, face a 3rd and 19. 3rd and 19 from their own 2-yard line. So if it's 3rd and 19 from your own 2-yard line, it's deep into the 4th quarter, and it's 21-16 Rutgers. Here's what you do. you snap the ball, and you throw it very far to a receiver, a 50-50 ball, if you will, just like Ethan Kelly Kamanis was doing, and you hope that the ball is caught or that you get a PI call. The last thing you do, all right, even I know this, the last thing you do is snap the ball and sit in the end zone with the ball in your hand while the defense is rushing at you, because guess what will happen? You'll get sacked. And that'll be a safety and another 2 points, and it will mean giving the ball back to Rutgers. Well, what does Max Brosmer do? He snaps the ball, drops back in the middle of the end zone, stands there for about 3 seconds, and goes down. Safety for Rutgers to make it 23-16, and giving Rutgers the ball back. Absolutely inexcusable. And now we're down to about 5 minutes, and Rutgers gets the ball back and fails to capitalize on 3rd and 7. This play call did not make any sense to me. 3rd and 7, with about 5 minutes left, Rutgers runs the ball up the middle. And of course, Minnesota stops them, giving Minnesota the ball back. I'm one of these people who, when you play to win. 3rd and 7, get the damn first down. Don't run up the middle. You're not going to get the first down. You may as well just punt it for all I care. Well, that's what they did. They punted, and Minnesota takes over. Now, let's put this into context. Minnesota, when they were ahead 16-14, had not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, 5 attempts to widen that lead, failed to do it. Rutgers takes the lead. Brosmer then takes a safety. So Minnesota's imploding all over the place, but they're still within striking distance. But what happens? Rutgers turned on the pass rush and completely overwhelmed that offensive line, as they did on the safety. 1st down, no gain. 2nd down, incomplete. 3rd down and 11, incomplete, with Rutgers putting tremendous pressure on Brosmer and making it impossible for him to go through his reads and progressions and find the open receiver. So Minnesota punts. Rutgers gets the ball back in Minnesota territory because Minnesota was losing the field position battle all day and was punting yet again from their own end zone. And then we have a great run by Jashawn Benjamin to the Minnesota 30 on 1st down. And then Benjamin, yet again, next play, another great run to the Minnesota 10, which leads to a Rutgers field goal to put them ahead 26-16. And then comes Minnesota's final drive. Yes, Minnesota's final drive. They convert on a 3rd and 10, and then Brosmer finally gets a long completion to the Rutgers 40, then completes it to the Rutgers 15. Now, if I'm PJ Fleck at this point, you've got about a minute 56, a minute 57, I think, left. Kick the damn field goal right now to make it a 7-point game. Do not go for the score because it's going to eat too much time off the clock. All right? If you score, there'll probably be about a minute left, ensuring that if you don't get the onside kick, you're finished. You still had a couple of timeouts. Kick the field goal then. No, PJ Fleck doesn't do it. Adjusts his tie again, puts those glasses on, and Minnesota, guess what happened? They spent 3 more downs trying to score, wasting time off the clock, and guess what they do on 4th down? They kick the field goal. A field goal they should have kicked several downs earlier, which would have given them about another 50 seconds on the clock. So they wound up doing exactly what they should have done, only to their detriment. And that left it up to the onside kick. Of course, the onside kick was reminiscent of what, I wouldn't say reminiscent of, it resembled Minnesota's play all day. Horrible. The onside kick was probably, if you were on the receiving end and you had to design an onside kick that was the easiest kick to catch on earth, you would have designed this one. The kicker hits it, and it bounces way up in the air, right into the receiver's arms. Rutgers goes into victory formation for the win, 26-16. Now, as I said, at the beginning of this show, there were several keys to this game. Number one, Ethan Kaliakmanis. Did that key go in Rutgers' favor? Yes, it did. 3 touchdown passes to 1 interception. Not a great completion rate, but he was good enough. Kyle Monangai was out, so we can't talk about that. Time of possession, Rutgers won that. Turnovers, each team had 1, but Rutgers recovered the critical turnover deep in Minnesota territory when the tight end fumbled to take the lead. So Rutgers wins on that key. Third down stops. Again, Rutgers, they got the stops when they were necessary. Now, Minnesota was, I believe, 7 of 16 on third down. Not great, but when the third down stops mattered, Rutgers got them. Explosive plays. Rutgers won on that key too. Okay? Their strategy was for Ethan to throw those 50-50 balls and hope that you got a PI call or a completion. And throughout the day, he got both. Rutgers wins on that key. Penalties, pretty much a wash, but the critical penalty that really hurt Minnesota was that 3rd and 14 when they stopped Rutgers at midfield but had the personal foul call. So it's not just the amount of penalties you get, it's when you get them and under what circumstances in the context of the game. Line of scrimmage. Rutgers wins again. In the second half, the defensive front overwhelmed Minnesota's offensive line in the trenches, and for 4 straight drives, Minnesota could not capitalize, and ultimately, Minnesota could not score when it mattered. So, on all the keys, Rutgers came out on top, and that equals a victory. And so what we have is Rutgers at 5 wins and 4 losses going into the remainder of the season, a much-needed win in Piscataway, because Rutgers is trying to build something under Coach Schiano. Coach Schiano, a fantastic coach, a great man. From 2001 to 2011, the 4th year in his tenure during that first stint, he turned that program around to make it nationally relevant. He's trying to do the same thing here, and this, again, is his 4th year where Rutgers is starting to bounce back and become a contender. But those 4 losses were devastating. Those 4 losses to Nebraska, to UCLA, to USC, to Wisconsin. This was a much-needed win for the kids to get their confidence back and for Coach Schiano to keep building the foundation that he's done such a great job of doing in his first stint and hopefully in his second stint. So Rutgers 26-16, 26-16 over Minnesota. A Minnesota team that beat USC, that was close with Michigan, only lost by 3 points, showing that Rutgers can compete. But for Rutgers to be successful, they have to be flawless because they don't have the talent to dominate teams or to not let mistakes hurt them. That's what Rutgers has to work on, the little things, to make sure their performance is polished and that they, can be one of those teams that when 4 or 5 plays decides the game, they can get those 4 or 5 plays. Before we end the show, and again, if you enjoy the show, please hit the like and subscribe button. We appreciate you being here. I called it last night. People said I was crazy. Maybe I am crazy. Georgia Tech takes down a very silly Miami team. Miami is finished. Okay, I'll tell you why Miami is finished. Miami is finished because they have no defense and because their offense is inconsistent, and today it came back to bite them. I predicted a Georgia Tech victory. Georgia Tech upsets Miami. Another thing that people say I'm crazy for, but that's fine. I consider it a compliment. Oregon's going to go down. They may not go down tonight against Maryland, but they're going to go down. I'm not sold on Oregon. And there will be a time when the Ducks finally do not quack. Lastly, Alabama, Louisiana State. If you've never been to Death Valley, I'm not sure whether to tell you to go or to stay away. It is, on one hand, an amazing tailgating experience. On the other hand, It is extremely loud, such that you may come out deaf or just traumatized, because the stadium, once in a while, just might shake because of how loud it is, especially at night, particularly at night. So, what's going to happen with Alabama and LSU? In my opinion, it's going to come down to how Jalen Milroe plays. If we see the Milroe who played against South Carolina, if we see the Milroe who played against Tennessee, if we see the Milroe who played in the first half against Missouri and in the second half against Georgia, Alabama will lose. Milroe will turn it over. He will be sacked. He will be ineffective. And don't think that LSU is not going to try to control the edges, blitz him, and spy him. Because the formula to stop Milroe, in my view, is pretty well known at this point. But on the other hand, if Milroe uses his legs, he's got to use his legs. If he uses his legs and runs like he did last year against LSU, Alabama can win the game. Because I don't think that LSU's defense has improved sufficiently to stop Milroe on a lot of those QB design runs, or more importantly, when the play breaks down. That's when he's at his best. I think Milroe needs to stop thinking of himself right now as a pocket passer and embrace his strengths. And DeBoer needs to have a scheme that caters to those strengths, like Tommy Rees did last year in the LSU game. If he does that and Milroe is on, I think that Alabama escapes with a narrow victory. My prediction, however, is that that's not going to happen. I'm predicting that Milroe is going to play good. He's going to play solid. But that the team as a whole is not going to be good enough in Death Valley. We've seen Alabama get a lot of penalties. We've seen their secondary be vulnerable. We have seen their defensive line not get a great push. And now you're putting them in Death Valley, where you're going to have about 95,000 fans screaming and drunk and desperate for a victory, because the team that wins this game is going to be in line for the playoffs. The team that loses is going to be on the outside looking in. So when you consider the totality of the factors, Milroe's performance, a weak secondary for Alabama, a defensive line that is not like the Alabama defensive lines of the past, a penchant for penalties. When you consider that, you have to also consider LSU. Sometimes Garrett Nussmeier decides that he wants to throw it to the other team for whatever reason, and we saw that in the second half against Texas A&M. You also have an LSU defense that, while improved and improving, is still nowhere near elite and can be vulnerable against the pass, and particularly against Milroe's, given Milroe's mobility. So both teams have weaknesses. So what's the deciding factor? The deciding factor, in my view, is home field advantage, a LSU receiving core that's going to exploit that secondary, distractions caused by the noise, which will lead to penalties, and a Milroe performance that will be good but not elite. And I think when you put those factors together in their totality, you come out with a 38-35 victory for LSU. But we'll see what happens at 7:30 Eastern. In the meantime, I hope you all enjoyed this show. I hope you enjoyed the discussion of Rutgers football. And on Monday, just to let you know, we typically have a show on Monday at 7 p.m. This Monday, we will have a show at 5 p.m., only because I have to teach a class at my college at 7 p.m. It's a one-time thing. But before we leave, we do have a caller. We have Austin Williams to the stage. Welcome. Always happy to welcome our callers. Austin, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. Congratulations, Adam.
Thanks.
One win away from bowl eligibility.
It's about time we got a win, because ever since I started this show, we've lost 4 in a row, so I felt like a damn jinx.
Yeah, that's one of the worst feelings I can imagine. But, Hey, You beat a good Minnesota team. You got that going for you now.
Yeah. Well, we're 5-4. I remember the glory days when we were 4-0, and I started the first show, and I said, "Oh, Rutgers is going to be a contender in the Big Ten." Then down we went. But it's good to get a victory over a pretty good Minnesota team. Am I guessing you're a Louisville fan?
Yes, sir.
And who did Louisville? Didn't Louisville destroy Clemson last week?
Yes, sir. In Death Valley at night.
Yeah, I watched the highlights of that game. It was absolute domination. I mean, unbelievable. So congratulations to you.
That was one of our more finer wins. But I will say, I'm glad Rutgers finally got off the snide because, man, there for a minute, I thought y'all weren't going to win another game because injuries were killing you all. Y'all got hit pretty bad. And then, of course, Greg Schiano, trying to just doing dumb things like he always does. Go.
Yep. You're exactly right. I mean, we were really banged up on the defensive side. And then when Monangai went down against USC, I thought, oh, geez, we could lose every game after this. But I think the bye week really helped them, and they've gotten a little bit healthier. And I'll be honest with you, I was stunned today that their defensive line so dominated Minnesota's offensive line. I think was the difference. But I still think Schiano, I really like him as a coach and as a recruiter and as a man. But I got to tell you, I'm not sure he's the best when he's on the sidelines. You know what I mean? In terms of his decision.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of those things that a lot of people can, like a lot of coaches are like that. Like you'll see some coaches go for it on 4th and 7 from like the other team's side of the field when they're up by 3. Those kind of decision makings. And Schiano sometimes does have some pretty bad decision makings at the wrong time.
Yeah. I remember when Rutgers had first and goal at the 2 against Nebraska, and they couldn't score on 4 straight downs. I mean, but, I think as far as Rutgers goes, they're 5-4 now. And in Schiano's last tenure, he did turn the program around. I'm not sure what's going to happen this time around because they're so inconsistent. And if you ask me, I think they need a better quarterback. I think Ethan is too inconsistent. He's got a great arm. But I think they have the pieces there, but they need more depth and they need more elite players. What do you think?
I've started watching Rutgers more recently because they're starting to get good again. And I feel like that's one of the key things I think that needs to be addressed is your all's depth because in some of your all's positions, you all get hurt in those positions. You're starting like these really young, inexperienced guys who are not getting time to develop, and it shows out there. And it's not their fault. It's just injuries happen in this sport, as we all know. We all deal with them. Every team deals with them. And Rutgers, unfortunately, got the bad brunt of the injury bug this year. They were one of the teams that got hit with it bad.
Yeah, they got hit with it bad, especially on defense. Like Flip Dixon was out for a while. He's back. But like you said, Rutgers has pretty competitive players, on the first team. But once any of them gets hurt, the depth isn't there. And I think Schiano's going to really have to look at the transfer portal and ultimately look into buying players to get the kind of depth we need to be competitive against, I mean, think about it this way. Indiana is 9-0 and probably is going to be 10-0. I haven't watched the Michigan game yet. I don't know what the score is, but Rob33 indicated that it was not going well for Michigan. And Indiana does not necessarily have an elite roster. So, Rutgers has to get to a point where they can be like Indiana in creating both a cohesive team, a disciplined team that plays flawlessly, and that gets at least a little bit more depth, and we'll see if that's going to happen. I'm not sure.
The only challenge that worries me about that is can Greg Schiano buy players, so to speak, to come to Rutgers because it is kind of like I know it's in the more New Jersey area, but most players would they rather just go like to Florida or these schools that they think they'd have a better chance at? Greg Schiano win them over.
I think you're 100% right. And I've said that before. Like, why would a player – well, there's two issues here. Why would a player go to Rutgers when they could go to Alabama, Florida, Georgia, or any of the other, what I would say more elite schools? And the second thing is that Rutgers – I'm from New Jersey, and I grew up in North Jersey. And I know Rutgers recruits a lot from the top high schools in New Jersey, Bergen Catholic High School, Don Bosco High School. But the top players in New Jersey are not as good as the players at like IMG or Modern Day. So what you're getting is a whole bunch of 3-stars. And if you don't develop them, you're going to turn into, at best, what you have now, 5-14. So
yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah, but how's Louisville doing? What's their record now?
Well, we're 6-3. We're on a bye, and off the bye we play Stanford, so we'll see how that goes. I'm hoping we don't have another letdown like we did last year. After we beat Notre Dame, then we had a letdown to Pittsburgh. I'm hoping Stanford isn't that situation again.
Well, I mean, you got the way you played against Clemson, man.
And Jeff Brom has been notoriously for doing this, even back in his days at Purdue. And I'm sure you know that very well, because being a Rutgers guy, being in the Big Ten, watching him.
Right. So, what are their chances of getting to the ACC championship with the win over Clemson?
So, due to the fact that we lost the 2 games to SMU and Miami, who currently sit in front of us, we need one of them to lose out, Clemson to lose one more, and we need to beat Pitt. And then we would get the title spot. We need a little magic to happen.
Well, with the way college football is going, man, you never know. And, today's been crazy so far with Miami going down. And Ole Miss is playing Georgia right now. And last I checked, Ole Miss was driving. It was 7-7. That's going to be a game. And who knows what's going to happen with Alabama, LSU this year. But
I will say that.
Yeah.
I will say this, though, Adam. I was really hoping, at the beginning of the year, after y'all beat Washington, I was kind of hoping y'all would be the Indiana of what Indiana ended up coming being, because it would have been a cool story. But then, of course, as we know. But the thing that I want to pick your brain about is, do you think going forward, do you see Rutgers as a dark horse potentially in the Big Ten if Schiano could put things together?
I think that it's possible, yes, but I think it's going to take a couple of more years, and it's going to depend on 2 things. Can they get the players to ensure that they have the necessary depth, and can they get more elite players, some 4 and 5 stars? Right now in the recruiting rankings, I think they're like 27th nationally with mostly 3 stars and a couple of 4 stars. I think they need to get better quality players. I think they need to buy players, or they need to go to the portal and get players like who are at Alabama or Georgia and aren't starting and want to start. So it's going to depend on who they get. It's also going to depend on the little things. I think that one thing I've noticed about Rutgers is they're not very disciplined, and that is different from Indiana. Indiana doesn't make mistakes. So can they do it? Yes. Their schedule next year is favorable, but ultimately, I'll be honest with you, what I see them becoming at this time is probably another Iowa at their best.
So going 8-4?
Yeah, kind of like that. At this point, I'm not saying they can't. They may, but I would say right now, given their players and given their recruiting status, I think they're probably looking at becoming another Iowa rather than becoming a legitimate contender, and like a Michigan. Well, not this year, Michigan, but like an Ohio State or an Indiana even. And I don't mean to sound pessimistic, but until they get better players and show that they can play mistake-free football, I think their ceiling is probably 8-4. But can they be 10-2? Sure, but they have to make those changes to do so.
Well, and the reason why I brought this up is because I've been watching your post games, and there's been weeks, especially after the UCLA week, where you've been very ticked off with this team, they could do better, and it just seems like it's that way from the fan base as well. Every Rutgers fan I've ever talked to or seen, they're always like, we like Schiano. He's brought us back to relevancy somewhat, but man, whenever they start talking about us, we just blow it at the inopportune time.
Yes, you're 100% right. So there's two types of Rutgers fans. The first type is the one that says we're always going to be mediocre, and they're just not bothered by it because they've accepted it. The second type is like me, who are just very frustrated, and I think that came across in my post games after Wisconsin and UCLA because they look lifeless. They're making mistakes, and part of my worry is that Schiano's going to leave, and I think he will leave within the next 5 years because I don't think he wants to be around a program that is going to stagnate, both for his own reputation and because at his age, I don't think he just wants to keep building and building if there's not going to be progress. And that brings me to a name that nobody seems to want to talk about, but it's the coach from South Dakota State, head coach Jimmy Rogers, who was the FCS Coach of the Year last year for a 15-0 South Dakota State team, 35 years old. I think following Schiano, if you want to talk about Rutgers improving over the long term, who they hire after Schiano is going to be absolutely critical. And I like Jimmy Rogers from the FCS. Young, hard worker, hungry, proven success record. But if they don't – go ahead.
I'm not to cut you off, but here, the problem – I like where you're going. Sometimes it's good to have fresh blood. But it's if most Rutgers fans are like, hey, I'm happy if we go 7-5 consistently and there's no need and they don't feel like pushing Schiano out. That's what frustrates me about some fan bases is they're just, like you said, the mediocrity. They're 7-5, we're happy and get a nice bowl win over, say, a Georgia Tech or Wake Forest, those type teams, and they're content with that.
That's what infuriates me the most. That's that's the one half of Rutgers fans. And when you have fans that are that that are satisfied with, say, maybe an upset victory over a top 15 team once a year and happy with an 8-4 or 7-5 record, the university has absolutely no incentive to make the team better. Because why would they? If the fans are happy with it, So that was another thing I talked about on a prior show was that the university really has to commit to being elite. And I'm not sure that they're doing that. But, we'll see because it's not acceptable to me. I mean, I hate seeing Rutgers always coming close and losing, And you look at Louisville, for example. Louisville goes at Clemson and absolutely dominates. I could never, ever see Rutgers doing that. And I think that's the problem. Is Rutgers going to commit to going into the portal, to buying the right players, to adding depth, to hiring new blood if necessary, and to committing to being not only an 8-4 program, but a program that's going to make the playoff? I don't know. And with a fan base that half of which accepts mediocrity, man, it doesn't bode well. Oh, we just lost Austin. Austin, I do appreciate the call and the conversation. Very good comments, and congratulations to Louisville for that great victory over Clemson. So at this point, we have no more callers. So we will end the show. If you liked it, hit that like and subscribe button. We're going to be on at 5:00 on Monday to preview Rutgers' next game and to talk about the state of Rutgers football. Like I said, it's typically always every Monday at 7 p.m. This will be an exception. It'll be at 5 p.m. And then we'll be on next Saturday for another post-game show and to welcome your calls. So thanks for being here. Go Rutgers, and have a great evening.